Hallo, ich habe euch etwas mitgebracht, ein neues Video.
Greetings, my name is Nina, welcome back to the Metal Book Tavern. This is a very unusual video for me. I still want to talk about this topic. I'd like to start this video by saying that the book segment on YouTube is an amazing thing. You get to talk about books, express your opinions, and get in touch with your fellow readers. And you get to influence other readers' reading choices. Wunderbar, isn't it? Fact about me, if you didn't know already, my first language isn't English, it's Russian. And since I speak Russian and English, I have access to two sides of Booktube. Note, I do recognize that the Russian and English booktubers aren't necessarily from their respective countries, but since they speak these languages, I'll refer to them as the Russian and English booktubers. Gonna be honest, I have seen a few booktubers on each side. However, I can tell you that I have seen enough to tell you what it's all about. Both sides, they have a lot in common, a lot of good things, and a lot of things that I dislike, and in this video I'm going to talk about the latter. I mean the things that I dislike about Booktube. Let's start with the tricky part. It is said that the Booktube should mostly remain positive. Recently I watched a Bookborn's video named Should Booktube Be Positive, and I will link it down below. Even though she doesn't make the point I want to make in this video, the title of this video made me mention it in this one. Yes, it said that Booktube should mostly be positive, and I do follow this mantra for myself and for you. I try to keep things positive as much as possible. You may think that my channel is biased because I tend to focus more on positive side of things rather than negative. But the truth is that I decided to give my time and attention, and your attention too, via videos to the books that are actually worth it. In other words, the positive side of things. If I happen to dislike a book, I quit it and keep it off my channel. I can say in my videos, I quit this book, I didn't like it, and this book is not for me, and that would be the end of it. Plain and simple. I recognize that it's important to be honest, but I also do want to remain positive, and I believe that it is possible to combine both honesty and positivity. Therefore, I try to dedicate my time and attention to the worthy books. It's positive because, well, they're worthy, they're cool, and also honest because I really did like them. Also, some of them are quite underrated and they deserve more readers. And the books that I didn't like, off my channel. Plain and simple. Although the biggest irony of this video is that there are only a few books that I quit purely because they sucked and I couldn't go through them. And some books that I deemed sucky I actually finished. But that was before I learned to quit books that I don't like. And sometimes it happens that I don't have much to say about the book. I can say, yeah, I read it, but it didn't impress me that much. The book was okay. Yeah, sometimes it happens. I can definitely say that the positive aspect of Booktube is that I learned to quit books and get rid of them. Like I said, it's important to be honest and say, I don't like this book. There are more books that are relevant than this one. This book is not for me. If I find myself thinking these thoughts during reading, I definitely quit that book and move on to, like I said, the more relevant books. The so-called irrelevant books, they can get lost, although there are cases where I might go back to the books Wait a minute. One of such books is When Giants Walk the Earth by Mick Wall. This book is a very dry biography of Led Zeppelin, and it was very hard to get through. Well, I also had the strong reading slump at the time of the reading. That also helped, but also the book was way too dry. However, I recognize the fact that I one day may go back to Led Zeppelin and I'd want to read more about them. I recently rediscovered Kashmir and now it's one of my favorite songs. And sooner or later I'd want to read this biography again. Yes, I'm willing to give it another chance, and this isn't the only book. This is my reading advice to anyone. Don't be afraid to ditch books you don't like, except the ones that you feel you might give another chance one day. I didn't read Lord of the Rings from the first attempt. I read the first book after multiple attempts. Don't be afraid to ditch books, or at least leave them for better days. Now let's move forward. I need to point out that this is a once-in-a-lifetime video. There are multiple reasons I am making it. I have been thinking about making this video for months because there are things I really dislike about Booktube these days, and I want to address them. For the last few months, I definitely have been watching more bookish content than any other type of content. There are multiple reasons I'm making this video. First, I want to speak my mind. Second, I want to bring a different perspective on Booktube. Third, I want to inspire others. 4, I believe it's possible to make Booktube better. And 5th, I simply want to rebel a little. Well, just a little. After this video, I will go back to my usual positive self. After all, Booktube should be positive, shouldn't it? Alright, let's do this. In random order. First thing that comes to my mind that I don't like is the reading choices of most booktubers. Hold on for a while. Freedom of choice, freedom of choice. It's a thing. If books booktubers choose bring them joy and they really like them, good for them. The same applies to you. And it applies to me. Yeah, freedom of choice. We read whatever we want, I'd hear you say. Yeah, true. However, there are nuances I want to address. Fact about me, I am very selective when it comes to books. When I go book shopping, I try to select books that I not only would like, but also would read again. My favorite method of selecting books is going to a bookstore, looking around, picking up a random book that looks interesting to me, reading the annotation, and then going to the cashiers. Regardless of whether I've heard about the book or not. Either way, I think carefully before I select a book. Sometimes it happens that I see a book and then I go, how I need it! And then I can't stop thinking about that book until I have it on my hands. One example of such book is A History of Heavy Metal by Andrew O'Neill. I couldn't calm down until I had this book and read it, and now it's one of my favorites. I always sensed which books I would like and which books I should avoid like plague. Back in 2015, when I had less books and they were also cheaper, and I was more eager to experiment. I still like to experiment, there's still a place for a random purchase. I like taking risk from time to time because why not? Why not give a chance to a random book by a random author? There's a chance I would love it a lot. Yeah, if the book seems nice, of course. Nowadays, though, I am much more careful. The sense of which books to buy and which books to avoid is much stronger in me right now. As an experienced reader, one thing you do is that you pick up books that are definitely going to last. If you sense right away that a book is a one-time matter, why pick it? I don't see the point. I do need to point out that back in the day I was surrounded by people who were like, but you are reading mostly a certain type of books, where's the diversity of genres and authors? Why aren't you going beyond your usual taste? Blah 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 blah. Sure, I was eager to experiment to try out various different genres. However, because of this diversity mentality, I picked up the wrong books and missed out on the right ones. Yeah, if you decide to go beyond your usual taste, still you should make wise choices. I didn't. Sure, it happened that I liked the annotation, but still the books were wrong for me for various reasons and they didn't last. I don't have them. In short, my main criteria for picking up books is their rereadability. Yes, I just invented a new word, if it didn't exist already. I am after books that I have a high chance of liking and rereading. It just happens that I pick up a book that seems interesting, that I would like, it seems so, and it fails to last. Yes, such things happen, but if I see a book that I 100% know that I wouldn't read, that it wouldn't last, I'm definitely avoiding it. See these books? They all have rereadable value. Okay, in fairness, my lowest shelf is for the books that are less relevant. However, I'm willing to give them another chance. Yeah, the books that they didn't have rereadable value for me, they're gone for good and faded into the oblivion. I forgot them. I don't miss them. I don't think of them. More space for better and more relevant books. Now back to the booktubers. Like I said, the first thing that I don't like is booktubers' reading choices. I noticed that most booktubers I watch try to get their hands on as many viral hits as possible. Viral hits, yeah, sounds like I'm talking about some popular videos or songs. Yeah, I know. But in this case, I mean super popular books. Nothing bad with reading viral hits on its own. However, it seems that most booktubers, they chase viral hits without considering factors other than the book's popularity. Does the book fit their taste? Do they simply want to take a step beyond their usual taste and try something new? Is this something they would eventually read again? Does any of the above even matter to them? Or it's mostly everyone is reading it, so I have to read it too mentality? Once again, if I haven't mentioned it already, I do not hate any type of work simply because it's popular. Harry Potter was and still is very popular. A Song of Ice and Fire / Game of Thrones was everywhere in the last decade. Both series were and still are incredibly popular. However, I can definitely tell you that neither of the series would have gotten so big, so popular, if they had nothing to offer to the readers. The plot, the characters, the setting, the atmosphere, and so on. And I love both series so much. I mean that these two series are very popular and still they have a lot to offer their readers / viewers / players if you play the games. Well, at least the Harry Potter games. I don't know the Game of Thrones games. I do have to admit that I'm not completely immune to the, well, everyone is reading it, so I have to read it too mentality. When such mentality became popular, I quickly started counting pros and cons. Or at least I would simply say, yeah, let's take a risk. Yeah, I like to risk sometimes. My point here that the book's popularity alone shouldn't be the main factor for buying and reading it. And it seems that this is what most booktubers do on both sides. This is my first concern about them. They follow trends blindly and it gets boring quickly and in some cases even dishonest. Yeah. Definitely. Second thing, the booktubers, they tended to buy the same books. Way too much. Well, in fairness though, there are multiple reasons for this. Ties to the publishers. Viewership. Or at best, they genuinely think the book is good and they like it. I hope it's mostly the latter. Alright, I am guilty of this as well. Most books that I own you've probably seen in videos of other booktubers. In my defense though, I bought most of them before I knew Booktube was even a thing. I started watching Booktube in 2020 and I have been buying books since 2013 around. Yeah, that's the year I began buying a lot of books. I selected most of these books without booktubers influencing me. And yes, it happened that I did get some books because of booktubers, and I'm going to show you some of them. Well, here are 3 prime examples when I got books because of a certain booktuber, and the booktuber is Book Leo. So Sapiens by Yuval Noah Harari, The Dispossessed by Ursula K. Le Guin, Humankind, A Hopeful History by Rutger Bregman. Out of these 3 books, I liked this one most of all. Yeah, let's put these books back. And that's all. These were simply a few books that were inspired by booktubers, and I can tell you one thing. Most booktubers, especially these days, fail to inspire me to get a book. Well, the main reason behind this is because most booktubers, they tend to lean towards the young adult genre, and young adult genre is absolutely not my cup of tea. Well, I have a video on this channel called the 7 book genres that I don't read, and young adult is definitely the first one. I do have some young adult books. Well, I have Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children. Also, I read and liked A Good Girl's Guide to Murder. Yes, young adult. I also intend to read The Inheritance Games and Radio Silence. And I also read the classic The Perks of Being a Wallflower and a few John Green books and the Maze Runner series. And I also absolutely loved the Ruby Red trilogy by Kirsten Gier. I think it's a very underrated trilogy. Yes, a little bit goofy, a little bit naive, but it's still a very lovely series. Oh, and also the first Percy Jackson book. This is what came to my mind when I thought of young adult. But that's kinda all, and I really don't like young adult. Absolutely not my cup of tea at all. Well, with a few exceptions, of course. Well, to be honest, there are 3 genres of books that I really love. Number 1 is fantasy, of course. My number 1 love, fantasy, really. But I do need to remember that just like metal, fantasy is divided into multiple subgenres. And my favorite subgenre of fantasy, it includes mostly high fantasy, Tolkien-like, and some urban. Yeah, speaking of fantasy and metals, I'm at the moment working on the script about the connection between fantasy and metal, which I promised since the end of the last year, but I did not do it, and the video is going to be. Second genre that I like is some philosophical, social fiction. Social fiction. I'm sorry for this term, but I think that you understood what I mean, with some non-fiction about society and philosophy. I made a video about my philosophy/non-fiction collection. You can watch it. I like, for me, some philosophy, modern, ancient, and from a few centuries ago. And the third genre I absolutely love, and I'm addicted to that genre, is music biographies. Whether they are about certain musicians, certain bands, or even the entire genres or the ways. Oh, let's put these books back. If you have been watching my videos for quite a while, you probably know that I am a metal fan. Yes. And all of biographies you just saw are rock/metal biographies. Metal in general is a rebellious genre, and I do have my rebellious moments. Well, some of them, small ones. Like I said, I wanted to rebel a little with this video. Rebel against way too much mainstream. Although, to be honest, this video is less about rebelling and more about ranting and wanting to improve things. Yeah, now when I think about it, the reason metal is considered a rebellious genre, because there's a desire for improvement for things. Now, I've made an entire video about, or to be exact, a podcast comparing book talk and mainstream music, because there are a lot of similar tendencies. Now when I think about it, booktubers and their reading choices, they remind me of fans of mainstream music a lot. Never thought in my life that I would encounter a book equivalent of mainstream music and their fans. If you want to know more, check out that podcast. Yes, sure, the video is about Booktube and the podcast is about Booktube, but in this very case, Booktube and the Book Talk are one thing. Now, speaking of rock music, one unwritten rule of rock and metal music, is that you can be inspired by others and you still have to find your own way to shine. I can say the same about booktubers and books they select and the type of content they make. Nothing wrong with buying books others read, but don't turn yourself into a blatant copy-paste. This is what booktubers seem to be doing and it kinda upsets me. And it was different in 2021, at least on the Russian side of things. I don't know, maybe I haven't seen too much booktube back in the day, but I do remember that at the time, the Russian booktubers, they tended to read various different types of books and they see that they really liked. And I liked the Russian side of things more because of that. The English side of things seemed to me way too much young adult dependent. Nowadays, Russian booktubers read young adult and other mainstream books as much as the English readers. There is also a strong prevalence towards certain authors. The authors are different on both sides, but I can definitely say that on the Russian side of things, probably the most popular author is Stephen King. I do think that he prevails way too much. Although I do kinda want to get into more King. Went 4 years without reading his books and now I wanna go back into reading them. I absolutely loved The Talisman, and the 2 books that I have yet to read by Stephen King are 11/22/63, that's hard to pronounce, and The Dreamcatcher. And also my edition of The Long Walk also includes The Running Man. Yeah, Stephen King is actually cool. I read his books before Booktube was even a thing. In general, I'd rather see him prevail. I'm actually surprised that Stephen King isn't that popular on the English side of things. I don't see too many English booktubers talk about him. Well, at least they talk about him less than the Russian booktubers. Russians tend to read him a lot. Well, at least Stephen King is definitely represented in metal, which is predominantly in English. But I diverged from the topic. Yeah, booktubers, they tend to favor certain authors. Not a bad thing on its own. I favor Tolkien. I collect his books. In fact, Tolkien is the only author in whose persona I am actually interested in. Well, I have this book called The Letters of Tolkien. This is a collection of letters Tolkien wrote to various people. And through these letters, you can learn a lot about him and also people who he was writing to. And, of course, Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit, The Silmarillion, and other books. Granted, some letters are much more interesting than others, but it's still interesting to know more about Tolkien. I'd love to read his biography too. Yeah, it's absolutely okay to have a certain favorite author, but I do believe that booktubers should know their merits. And also, booktubers, they tend to praise certain authors or series without pointing out what's so great about them. It's so good that the books gave you so many positive emotions that you like them and so on. However, and it would be better for you to explain what makes the series so great. Well, for example, one booktuber explained why Red Rising series by Pierce Brown are so good. The booktuber explained the plot and what's going on and the setting. And I was like, yeah, I definitely want to read this. I want to read the Red Rising series because they seem so cool. This is how you do it. I see a lot of praise for Robin Hobb's books. Seriously, what are so great about them? What makes them stellar? And no, I do not ask this question in the, oh, I read her books and I didn't like them manner. No. I haven't read her books. I'm asking this question because booktubers tend to praise her without explaining what makes her so great. And I'd like to have a sort of a guide to the plot, to the setting, to the characters, what makes the story so great. One thing I know that her characters, they suffer a lot and rarely get what they want. That's all. Yeah, way too many emotions and no explanation on why she's so cool. Last book about book reading choices. Booktubers tend to put an emphasis on quantity rather than quality. They tend to buy way too much, and this sentence is coming from someone who loves buying books a lot and who is constantly looking for more. Most of the purchased books, the booktubers either fail to read or don't like, and eventually they get rid of these books. Sure, I also got rid of books, and sure, it happened that I purchased a book which I eventually didn't want to read anymore. Yes, that happened. I think I gave away 2 books I intended to read and failed, and I eventually didn't want to read them anymore. Either way, alright, let's move on from book purchases. Now let's go to the video formats. You'd think I'd be into all formats, both as a viewer and a booktuber. Wrong. Unpopular opinion. I don't enjoy long videos of books the booktuber read. I find them kinda boring. Unless it's a book I want to read. Okay, I've also made videos about books that I read, and I try to talk about them briefly. Well, on my channel I have a video series called Why It's Worth Reading, where I dive deep into the books and explain why it's worth reading them. I go through the plot, characters, setting, and so on. I absolutely favor my Narnia video. I think it's the best video I have ever done because it's well researched and shot and the sound is cool. Yeah, so far I have only 4 episodes and I'd love to make more, but I have to write the script first. While my Beneath the Wheel video was completely unscripted. But in general, I find the books I've read videos boring, unless I have read the book or I'm interested in reading it. And given the reading choices of most booktubers, it's kinda easy to say why I don't like books I've read videos. I think that's one of the reasons. I don't like reading marathons either. I'm a very slow reader. I do not want to turn reading into competition. I really want to enjoy reading and then share my perspective with you. Yeah, I prefer to read in peace. I can read a book for a reading vlog. I love reading vlogs, but 24-hour marathons or something, nah, thank you very much. Do I like even watching them? Rarely. And now let's move on beyond. There is one thing I really dislike about booktubers themselves. No, this time this isn't about their reading habits or the types of videos they make. No, not at all. This is something unrelated to either. I have a video on my channel about my favorite books. One of the books that I showed in this video is A History of Heavy Metal by Andrew O'Neill. I have a separate video about that book. Now when I think about it, it should have been a Why It's Worth Reading episode. I didn't make it one, unfortunately. I pointed out that one thing that I absolutely disliked about the book, I really didn't like it, it was where that the author was like, this persona said this persona did that. I think that you got the hint. Watching certain books appear in videos of certain YouTubers, they feels like walking on the eggshells, because when booktubers pick them up, they tend to remind viewers that the author did this or said that, blah blah blah. But the very first podcast I did for this is the art and the artist. One thing that I said in that video is that if I am really interested in someone's work, well, there's nothing to stop me. If you want to know more, I recommend you check out that video, and I'm sure that most of you feel the same way. If you are interested in someone's work, you are interested in the work and nothing else. Those constant reminders of the author's wrongdoings, they won't make people suddenly stop reading them or buying their books or whatever. In fact, those reminders are going to make the viewers angry and annoyed, especially if those reminders are done in a passive-aggressive, indulgent, or plaintive manner. Plaintive, sorry. This is a new English word for me. Nobody wants to be constantly reminded of bad things. It's repetitive and annoying and irritating and whatever. Seriously, those constant reminders would turn me against the booktuber rather than the author. I genuinely don't understand what booktubers try to do here. Gain virtue points? Appeal to a certain demographic, share what they think, all of the above, or maybe they are afraid of what would come if they don't make the correct statements. I think it's genuinely better to stay silent on the matter, because why not? This is predominantly on the English side of things. One main difference between the English and Russian booktubers, well, at least so far, and it's mostly in the favor of the Russian side of things, is that Russian booktubers, they talk about books themselves rather than the author. Okay, so freedom of speech. Booktubers are free to point these things out. However, I'd recommend them, before saying these things, ask themselves one important question. Is it actually worth it? I really don't think so. You have a really strong dislike for the author. I mean really strong, that you can't fathom them. Don't talk about them or their books. One of the best parts about the booktube and the internet overall is that we can disregard the things that we don't like. This is the same as with social media in general. If you absolutely hate someone's page, it makes you feel negative or whatever, there's certain negative antics, unfollow that page. And this isn't for the audience, it's for yourself above all, for your own peace of mind. Why would you constantly remind everyone of what the author said or did, when you can simply move on to other authors without it and praise them and find some gems among them, their books? I think that's the best option. Peace of mind for all. Yeah, I know that this topic is a bit controversial, just like my first podcast. However, I do stand by my word. I think it's genuinely better to select your own peace of mind above all. Yeah, definitely think that this video is completely controversial. I think that I haven't been this controversial since my Art and the Artist podcast. I think I later changed the name to your standard separate the art from the artist. Yeah, I definitely recommend you check out my first podcast about the art and the artist. I make my stance very clear, and I still stand by my word. Peace of mind for everyone. If you are really interested in the art, go for it. Don't let anybody stop you. Fact about the script for this video, I have been writing this for nearly 2 months, probably since September up to November. I am filming this on November 4th, and at the time of writing the script for this video, I really wanted to point out, but I didn't, I'm pointing this out at the very end, is that since I live in Georgia, I didn't have access to the vast majority of the books the booktubers talked about, the vast majority of mainstream books. The deal is that I wanted to point that out. Eventually, this statement did not age well. For a few days ago, I went to the bookstore and they had an entire segment for book talk popular books in English, and also they had books from popular Russian authors. Yeah, the statement did not age well. I can easily find the popular books now. I'm still not interested in them. And so anyway, that's all. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this slightly controversial video. But this video is, this is a discussion video. This video is a rant, but I want to improve things. I want to be better. I want to go make things positive, but also without being generic too much and blah 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 blah. Since this video is slightly controversial, I want to ask you, what's your controversial take? Let me know down in the comments. See you next time. Goodbye.